So, hi guys, welcome to this video, which is going to be about Southeast Asia and India. It's going to be about the economic development there with a special focus on the internet online economy. This has been really exciting to make. It's given me great insights and I'm going to pass it on to you in here. My interest for this area is actually because of Sea Limited, which many of you know I invest in and follow. It's a Singapore-based company that has Garena, a gaming arm, and Shopee, an e-commerce arm. And this Southeast Asia is their home turf, and that's why I've been so interested in it. And it is amazing. It's the numbers I'm going to show you, they are just amazing. This could be the investment opportunity of a lifetime for many of us. Lots more about that. A little bit about me. I'm a private investor and I have this YouTube channel, the Gaming and Esport Investor. If you like this video and want to see more, please press subscribe and please like my videos. It helps me. Also, I'm not going to be talking about specific stocks to invest in here. But I'm going to write some down below in the comments field what I'm looking at when trying to find investments into Southeast Asia and India. And if any of you guys have any suggestions or anything, please do suggest it down in the comments below. Yeah. So my research here is actually based on three sources, which I have here on the first slides to give them credentials. I think the most important source is Asia Partners 2019 Internet report about called Southeast Asia's Golden Age. One of the Asia partners is Nick Nash. He's a former CEO of Sea Limited, so he really knows the region and knows the internet economy of the region. And then there is some based on the Google Temasek Bain report on Southeast Asia and e-economy in that region for with predictions for 2019 and going on. And also I have grabbed some slides and tables from Simon Kemp from datareportal.com. There is great statistic material there about internet economy, about website traffic, about social media, etc. And Simon is also available in Analyze Asia podcast every once in a while, and that's really worth listening to. So these are the three sources that I want to give credit to. So let's look into it. The region that I'll be talking about is Southeast Asia, and that's the part of the world which is marked with blue here. There's really not much economy in Myanmar yet. But otherwise, it's the other countries here. Sea Limited is operating in Taiwan as well, but that's not what you call Southeast Asia. Here are the countries with their populations. You see that Indonesia is a large country, 264 million people. I'll be coming back to that. There are some staggering numbers about mobile users, etc. from Indonesia. Vietnam, almost 100 million people, so it's the same size as Germany. Philippines, a little bit bigger, and Yeah, lots of people in this region of the world. I'll come back to that. So here are some more specific numbers about economic. I'll come back to that. In the blue triangle here, you see that the total population in 2019 will be about 654 million people. You see that their growth in gross domestic product has been on average 8.6% over the last 20 years. Then moving on to next slide here. We see their gross domestic product of the respective countries here in the first column. We see Indonesia is the biggest with 1.1 trillion US dollars. Thailand with 529 billion US dollars. And then down, and we see Philippines, which was actually one of the larger countries, is the lagging one economically wise. Vietnam is also small when it comes to economic, but it's bigger when it comes to internet economy relative to the other countries. Here are the populations. I think this one here is quite interesting. Relevant technical talent. We see that Singapore is high and Vietnam is high. Singapore, you see a number of global IPOs here, 317, way more than the rest of the countries in the region. Singapore is a hub. It's one of the easiest places in the world to make business, one of the safest places to make business, so it's in the center and very structurally well. So it's a good capital for the region, economic capital for the region, and makes it rather safe for an investor to invest into this region, because you can buy companies which are either listed in Singapore or based in Singapore. Just to give you an idea of the size of this of these countries, then we have here the number of mobile subscribers, and Southeast Asia is the third largest region or pool of mobile subscribers in the world. Number one here is South Asia, number two is China, and then we have Southeast Asia. I think what is probably the most interesting here on this slide is that Indonesia alone has more mobile subscribers than North America. That's really something. Here we see also, just to give you an idea of the numbers of the region, then we have here the Facebook advertising audiences. So this is in absolute numbers, how many people can Facebook reach in different states and regions in different countries. And we see that India is the largest country. 1/4 of their population can be reached by Facebook, and it's 269 million. We see that Indonesia is the third largest country in the world in terms of how many Facebook users there is, and they have 123 million Facebook users. Brazil is the fourth largest country. I'll be putting some emphasis on Brazil because C Limited's game Free Fire is really successful in Brazil, and C Limited's e-commerce platform Shopee has opened up in Brazil recently, so I'll be looking a bit to the Brazilian market as well. And we see here it's the fourth largest Facebook advertising market. Then on the sixth and seventh place, sixth, seventh, eighth place, we also have countries from Southeast Asia. Of course, China is not here. Next slide here is time per day spent using mobile internet. And we see here that these countries that I'm talking about, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, are countries that where the population are spending large amounts of time each day on the mobile phone. So we're going to see that there is a large number of people with access to the to mobile phones. They spend a lot of time on their mobile phone, so their mobile phones and spendage is integrated in these countries. And later we're going to see that the economics is not really there yet. And that's actually going to be the big point of everything I'm showing you today. Here we see here we see how financially developed they are. This is credit card ownership, and we see that Southeast Asia is really trailing the rest of the world. Only 2% of people in the Philippines have a credit card. Here, this is kind of interesting. This region, along with India and perhaps China, are actually some of the leading in voice search and voice commands on the phone. And that's simply because many people that uses the internet, they cannot read or write, or at least not very good. So, so you really need to be able to use voice search and voice commands in order to address these markets, these places in the world. And there are a lot of different languages. So the companies operating in these regions get very good at voice search, voice command, voice interacting with your telephone. Here is use of ride-hailing apps in the world. We see that again, Southeast Asia is some of the leading nations in the world in terms of using ride-hailing apps. Mobile wallets, we see the opposite trend of credit card. We see that they are ahead of the world average in terms of mobile wallets. So the economy has sort of skipped banking and credit cards and stuff like that, and they're just moving towards an economy on the mobile phone. So actually, in some terms, they'll be ahead of us, even though we economically they lack a lot. Here is the ease of doing business in Southeast Asia. We see that Singapore is the second easiest place in the world to do business, but we also see that all of the countries are developing very nicely in terms of ease of doing business. So this is a region of the world which is developing nicely in terms of doing business. Here is the GDP growth, annual GDP growth in the region as a whole, in the C region, 6 countries. And we see that in 2010 it was about 8, and that was the average over the last 20 years. That was 8.6%. So the growth has slowed somewhat. And I'm going to show you that's actually okay, because the discretionary income is rising rapidly, and that's the most important for the internet economy. So here, and we can see that it's flattening out somewhere around 5% right now, which is somewhat more than the world, the average growth in the world. How about future growth? Future growth largely depends on the population, on demographics. I have some different demographics here. We have the United States here, and we see that the young age groups are almost the same size as the elder age groups. So it's very rectangular. We have China here, and we see that the young age groups are smaller than the adult age groups, and that means that the working part of the Chinese population is going to have a tendency to not growing or even to become smaller, and that's going to be a problem for China's economy going forward. Here we have Indonesia, and we see that the young age groups are actually larger than the adult age groups, and this is even more pronounced when looking at India. So for Indonesia and India, we are going to see a growth in the absolute number of working people in the age where they're capable of working, both in absolute and in relative terms over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And that's going to make it very likely that they're going to have a good economic growth. Here is another way of showing it. We see the number, this chart shows the number of young adults. We see that in China, it's 15 to 24-year-old population. We see that in China, the number of 15 to 24-year-old has been declining from 230 millions to 150 million, about that. We see, if we go to Southeast Asia here, we see that it's been rising a little bit, and it's around 110 million now. So the young part of the population in Southeast Asia is 71% of the young population in China. So that's the relative size, and these age groups are going to be the ones that is going to drive the economics going forward. So whereas Southeast Asia is somewhat smaller than China now, they're going to catch up, at least when we're talking about the part of the population that's going to work and driving growth. And that's going to be even more pronounced for India. North America, here we see a kind of stable, but we see that Southeast Asia is larger than North America when it comes to the young part of the population. So in 10 years, the part of the population that's capable of working is going to be very much larger in Southeast Asia than in North America. It already is, but that's something to factor in, especially when we're going to look at the total GDPs of these countries, where North America is much larger. And it's in the future. I'll come back to that. Here we see Japan as well. Then we see here some charts over some periods where there has been a golden age in an economy. We've seen one in Japan in the 50s. We've seen one in Korea in the 70s and 80s. And we've seen one in China the last decade or two. These charts here, the upper line here is showing the average GDP per capita on the y-axis, and the time in history on the x-axis, and the numbers are inflation adjusted, so they are correspond, or you can compare them. So what we see is that and then in the lower charts here, they're showing gross saving rates as a percentage of GDP, and that number, gross saving rates as a percentage of GDP, is being used here as a proxy for discretionary income. So discretionary income is what you have left when you've paid what you need to pay for housing, clothes and food. And that's the term middle class, is when you have a discretionary income. So when you're poor, you are not middle class, you spend everything you have on just basic necessities. And then when you get middle class, you have a discretionary income. So when the people of an economy just moves from poor to middle class, they will have a discretionary income that's zero or very little. And then over the coming years, the growth that comes from there is going to be enormous, because when you measure what will be spent on leisure and luxury items, not luxury, but just consuming. So consuming of anything other than necessities will kind of explode in this period of time, when people in average go from having $100 a month in discretionary income, and that goes to 200, 300, 400. The money they have for consuming will double, triple, and quadruple over short periods of time. So that gives what they call here the golden age of an economy, where the economy really starts picking up. And and that's what they're showing here, that in these periods where the discretionary income, here measured by gross saving rates as a percentage of GDP, really rises, that's where we see the golden age in the economy. And we can see out here that the golden age is usually when adjusted for inflation, the economy goes from what would be 3,500 to 7,000 US dollars of GDP, inflation adjusted. So that would correspond to dollars today. When it goes from 3,500 to 7,000, that's where we really see an explosive increase in this discretionary income. And I'm going to show you where Southeast Asia and India is today, here on this chart. We see that the golden age here is between 3,500 and 7,000 US dollars. And we see that Southeast Asia is in this zone right now. We also see that India is closing in on this zone. So therefore, in these two areas of the world, we are going to see a rapid rise in the discretionary income, and that's going to give a really fast increase in consumption in these countries. Yes, and it's regions of the world with populations that are larger than North America and Europe, and so it's going to be significant. We also see here on this chart that if we take Japan, then in 1960, they were just out of the golden age, and their GDP per capita was 7,000, whereas that for an American was 3 times as much. And now the difference here, Japan is somewhere around 35 or something like that. So it's the American has a GDP of less than twice the amount of the Japanese. And for Korea, we see here they started out very low, and they've almost catched up with Japan now. We also see China catching up somewhat. So the most likely thing is that we will see over the next decades that Southeast Asia and India will catch up somewhat with the industrialized part of the world, with the Western societies in terms of GDP per capita. And that's just enormous when you think about that their populations are much larger and are going to be much larger than the populations of Europe, where I come from, or North America, or Japan. So it's, I think it's a no-brainer to find some good investments in these areas of the world and keep them for a very long time. So that's been about the general economics and the demographics of these countries. Now we're going to look at the internet economy and compare that to the general economy. Here we see how much GMV on the internet, how much is spent on the internet is compared to GDP of various countries, and up the y-axis is the growth. So in terms of internet economy, how large a part of the total economy it is, then we have US and China out here, somewhere around above 10%, and we have Vietnam around 5%, and then we have the rest of Southeast Asia between 2.5 and 5, and we have Philippines, which is lagging. And actually, if you remember, then Vietnam's economy was kind of small compared to some of the other countries, Thailand, Malaysia, etc. So they're very far in terms of digitalization of their consumption, but not so far generally economic wise. We see that Vietnam and Indonesia are the ones which has the largest growth of the internet economy of 40% or more. And we see that Southeast Asian countries are generally between 20 and 40% in growth of the internet economy, and that's from 2015 to 2019. The numbers going forward are going to be a little bit smaller if we based on especially the Google Temasek report. Here are the internet economy GMV as a percentage of gross domestic products, and we see that the C region in 2015 was only 1.3% on the internet. Right now it's 3.7%, and Google Temasek report estimates that it's going to be 8.5% in 2025. And I think that's very likely. We see China around 10% now, and we, as I showed you in the beginning, the people in these countries, they are using their phones a lot, and they have money on their internet wallets. They don't have the usual credit card stuff and that, so they are poised for integrating internet economy as a high percentage of GDP. Then we have here we have something of the same e-commerce spend versus total retail spend. We see that Thailand is high up here on e-commerce spend. Taiwan is high up, and we see these the rest of Southeast Asia being down here in these 4%, something like that. Then we have the internet economy's contribution to GDP, and we see that Vietnam is the highest. And then we have Singapore, Indonesia, and we see Philippines lagging here. Here is an interesting one. That's Ecommerce ARPU. That's the average amount spent on e-commerce purchases of consumer goods by each e-commerce user in 2018. And we see that the countries in Southeast Asia are very low. So, and that's because their discretionary income is very low. These numbers are going to grow explosively because of the growth in discretionary income, whereas the countries up here, which has a high discretionary income, their ARPU is not going to grow that much. Here we have annual growth in total online consumer spend. Here we have the growth in e-commerce sales, and that's the growth in 2019. We see total online consumer spend, 25%. And we see here the Latin America, Southeast Asia being highest. And that's the growth rates that I think we can expect on the internet economy in the years going forward in this region of the world. Here we see the annual growth in total online consumer spend, and we see that the countries in Southeast Asia are the countries with the highest growth. We have plus 20% in Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand. Philippines at 16%, and we have India up there as well. So this is the growth in online consumer spend, and it's going to be lying up there. And one of the reasons is the high growth in discretionary income in these countries. So this is from the Google Temasek report, and they expect a 33% compounded annual growth rate in internet economy. The Southeast Asian internet economy in GMV right now is $100 billion, and they expect it to be $300 billion in 6 years. So triple in 6 years. Here we have the value of Southeast Asia's online economy. We have 2018 and 2019 and their estimations. We see that e-commerce is the dark blue one, and online travel is the lighter blue. And we see that e-commerce is going to grow to be the largest segment. Right now travel is the largest segment, but e-commerce is going to grow to be the largest segment, at least in what the experts expect. One thing that also is interesting is that the ride-hailing apps is quite a small part of the internet economy compared to e-commerce. And that's actually funny, because every time somebody talks about Southeast Asia, they're talking about Gojek and Grab, and nobody ever talks about Sea Limited or Lazada. And I find that kind of funny because, because of numbers like these. Here we have the Southeast Asian e-commerce, so focusing in on e-commerce now, and we see that they're expecting in Google Temasek and a growth of 39% from 2015 to 2025. It's been 62% from 2015 to 2019. So when the average is going to be 39%, then the growth is going to be somewhat smaller in the next 6 years than 39. So we're going to be closer to 20-25%-ish. Again, e-commerce, we have the different countries. Here you can see the size of e-commerce in the different countries. Here, Vietnam with the relatively smaller economy than some of the other countries, but with a large e-commerce economy, larger e-commerce than the other countries. And Indonesia being by far the largest economy in this region of the world. So then some interesting figures, charts here from Asia Partners in their report. This is the China development. It's the IPOs that comes from China. And you see here the sectors that they come from, and then you have the timeline down here. And narrowing down, making it more simple in this chart here, is that we start out in the 90s with television and mobile companies, semiconductors, data centers. And then around 2000 and going on, we had what they call Internet 1. We had ads on the internet, games, travel, and horizontal e-commerce. Then around 8 and 9, we got the 2.0 internet with the specialty e-commerce, video streaming, fintech, and social being large. And now we're moving on to what they call 3.0. And here we have online to offline. That's Meituan Dianping in China. That's Grab and Gojek in Southeast Asia. We have online books, online health. Here in the 2.0 we have social and chat. That's very much Facebook apps in Southeast Asia now. Online video is here fintech, ecom, logistics. And then let's look at where we are in Southeast Asia right now. We have the layer here, and then we have C Limited here, which is e-commerce, and they're also video games. And then we're probably going to have IPOs about the rest here going forward. At least that's what we can kind of anticipate and expect, and we'll see what happens. And that actually concludes my video here about Southeast Asia and the internet economy, where it's going, where we are, and what to expect. And I think the conclusion is that they are very well in the game when it comes to smartphones and spending time on smartphones, smartphone economy, and they're just beginning to have a discretionary income. So that means that the consumption is of things which are not just normal necessities. That consumption is going to explode over the next 10 years going on from here. And it's the same picture in India, And I suspect that Latin America will be somewhere around the same place going forward. So that's really exciting, and I think it's definitely something that you should look for. So like I said in the beginning, if you have good investment ideas addressing this, please do write them down there below. I'll write my ideas. The companies I think one could look for, trying to invest into this growth in internet economy in Southeast Asia, India, and South America as well. I think would be interesting. If you like my videos, please like them. Please subscribe to my channel. It helps me. Yeah, and I guess that's it. So thanks for watching, and good luck with your investments.